How do the Miami Hurricanes match up with the North Carolina Tar Heels? Let's go behind enemy lines.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet, and contributor to allhurricanes.com. Thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen today. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. This is a great opportunity for the Hurricanes to bounce back and put an awful loss behind them. For more on the North Carolina Tar Heels, let's connect for an epic crossover with Locked On Tar Heels. For more on this matchup, had to bring in my good friend Isaac Shade, Locked On Tar Heels, for some crossover magic. Miami Hurricanes, 25th ranked team in the country. How they're still ranked, I don't know. North Carolina, number 12. It's a prime time matchup at 7:30 p.m. Isaac, how are you?
I'm doing okay, Donno. I got my Braves jersey on. We're recording this on Wednesday. I got my tomahawk going ahead of Game 3 between the Braves and the Phillies. We'll see what happens tonight. But outside of that, I got a little tickle in my throat, Donno. I'm struggling with that, but we'll be fine here. I got the water. I got the coffee, which actually dries me out. That's probably worse. But what's funny is that you mentioned that about falling out of the top 25. The Carolina fan base all week has been saying, oh, well, if that was us, we would have been gone. We would have been out of the AP top 25. And I get that. So it is. I was with you. I was like, wow, Miami's holding on. The voters kept them in just a little bit there.
Yeah, honestly, I kind of felt like they deserved to drop out of the top 25 just as a lesson.
On principle, right.
Okay, so we're going to start with here. I think you guys know where I'm going to go, so I will let Isaac take the floor first. Biggest storyline heading into this game from the North Carolina side?
Well, the biggest news came out actually last Thursday, a week ago today, was that after this long, protracted, heated debate with the NCAA, Tez Walker was finally ruled eligible for North Carolina. This guy that was a preseason first team all ACC wide receiver on the Biletnikoff Award watch list and is ruled immediately eligible. So was able to play last week against Syracuse. But while he's been practicing with the team, it's not, Donno, that's not a true representation of getting ready for games, because since he's not eligible, you can't really have him getting all those first team reps. So all he had ahead of last week's game was a Friday walkthrough with the team, and yet still had, I think, 6 receptions on 8 targets, second on the team. And so the key storyline for me is, how does this affect Carolina's offense now, which is already high level, which is already a lot more varied than it was last year. So how does now getting this guy you expect to be your number one receiver, full week's worth of reps back into this lineup, what does that mean for then how it filters out to everyone else on the offense? So I'm really watching to see what the Carolina offense is with Tez Walker, hopefully more fully ready than he was last week.
And I was happy for Tez. Should have happened before the season even started, and I thought it was a little bit weak by the NCAA, the way they're like, oh, it was because North Carolina hadn't given us all the information. It's like, just own it. You buckled under pressure to do the right thing finally, which you should have done to begin with. And listen, I was also happy, Isaac, one of Miami's coaches, defensive coordinator Lance Guidry, was asked about Tez Walker, and of course he was very complimentary about Walker as a player, and also mentioned he was glad he got cleared. He thought it was the right thing, because as coaches, they never want to see guys with eligibility lose an opportunity to play for a season. So I thought,
when you see the brotherhood come together. I mean, it's the same thing. You never want to see a player go down injured. It's that same thing. You want to win a football game, but not at the expense of somebody getting hurt. And it's very similar on that.
Yeah, so for Miami this week, the storyline, it's basically hitting me on top of the head with a sledgehammer. It's so obvious, and that's how the Hurricanes are going to respond, okay? Because if I were to take my intense knowledge and history of the Miami program away from the situation, I would see a team that just suffered a unnecessary, horrific, choke job of a loss last week. And if I remove, like, all I know about the program and the fandom, I would say, okay, that team's probably going to be pretty angry and will respond, like a wounded animal the following week, right? But the problem is that's not really been the history and the DNA of Miami over the last 20 years, that oftentimes when this team faces adversity, it tends to spiral, rather than kind of galvanize the group. And that's where we're going to have to see if this is different, because yes, players and coaches since Monday have been saying the right things, but saying the right things and actually doing the right things on the field are two different things. Mario Cristobal mentioned on Monday that players have been just chomping on the bit to get back on the field, right? That it left such a bad taste in their mouth the way that Georgia Tech game ended, that they just want to get out there. They want to play again. They want to hit somebody. And Matt Lee, Miami's starting center, who's one of the emotional leaders of the team, he was very emotional on the sidelines at the end of that game
with the long hair.
Yeah,
that was awesome.
yeah. And he said
we won't repeat what he was saying. How about that?
I don't think we can. I think
I think that David Locke would revoke our jobs.
And Tyler Van Dyke talked about putting it behind them. So again, it's like if you take the professional approach, and they do have some strong characters in the locker room as far as player driven group and team leaders. So hopefully they can respond the right way. And listen, I appreciate the fact that Mario Cristobal, after making one of the most boneheaded calls I've seen, quite frankly, covering Miami, not to take a knee. He did take accountability for it. And I think that's when you talk about moving forward and keeping the trust of your players, I think being accountable is the only way that you can do that, right? So Miami needs to show up and they need to play. I think it was Josh Pate who said, play like a team with your hair on fire. Like that's the way that you hope they're going to play this Saturday against North Carolina, but it's yet to be determined.
Well, I'm over here hoping that Carolina's got some fire extinguishers in the locker room then, Donno, because I don't want to see that fire. I don't need that noise. But yeah, I mean, I think that's been the question on the Carolina side all week is, will this be a team that's wounded and spirals and doesn't know how to respond, or will they respond well? And what's interesting to me, Donno, I didn't play sports at super crazy high levels, but enough to where I realized that there's also the possibility of you go too high into your energy and you make costly mental mistakes with that. So there's almost like, I feel like there's this happy medium for the Hurricanes this weekend where it's like, you don't want to spiral, but you don't want to be emotional about it either. You want it to focus you rather than it being like this overhyped response, right? Like, is that a healthy way for them to approach it?
It's a tremendous point you bring up, because Miami's one of the most penalized teams in the country. So you think about if you're a little bit too jacked and the adrenaline is going through the roof, does that mean you're going to have that extra shove out of bounds, right? Does that going to mean you're going to have, you're going to put your body weight on the quarterback when you tackle him and risk getting a roughing the passer penalty? Because that's been a problem for Miami, even when they haven't had extra adrenaline and motivation. How do you kind of rein some of that back in? So I think that's worth it. I know that, something else I want to address is obviously on top of the fact that Cristobal did cost the team the game. I know that Miami fans are sharing these screenshots about all the, how the fumble by Don Chaney wasn't really a fumble. And I agree it wasn't a fumble. And because I feel bad for Chaney. Like, I feel really bad for him that he has to take any of that heat. And this stuff it doesn't change the outcome. So I kind of wish maybe some of our fans would move forward a little bit more, because yes, you were hard done by the officials, but you were hardest done by your own coach and your own team. So they need to respond from that.
Exactly. He shouldn't have ever been in the position to potentially fumble it, whether that was the right call or not. But I agree. I know that video evidence didn't show it and it's call stand situation rather than confirmed, but still should have never happened. Well, Donno and I want to talk more about what are the key matchups in this game as you're tuning in on Saturday night. What are you watching for on the Miami side? What are you watching for on the Carolina side? That's going to help ultimately determine who is the winner of this football game. We're going to get to that conversation in just a second. But first, we need to tell you that this episode of Locked On Canes and Locked On Tar Heels is brought to you by FanDuel. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is super easy to use. You can bet on all sorts of stuff, spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
Thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Tar Heels and Locked On Canes your first listen each and every day. I always love when we can do these crossovers. And hey, if you guys want to watch this again, if you're watching it on Locked On Canes, go watch it again on Locked On Tar Heels and vice versa. We are free wherever you get your podcasts and available free on YouTube. So, wow, Isaac, this game I think is ripe with crucial matchups. And these two teams, North Carolina has definitely gotten the better of Miami in recent years. Most of the matchups have been really close. I think despite how bad Miami's season was last year, people forget how good Tyler Van Dyke was against the Tar Heels last year and just how close that game was. And costly error, a Jalen Knighton fumble, who's, no longer on Miami, was, one of the reasons why Miami couldn't close a comeback victory in that game. So it's been close in recent years. Anything you look at, Isaac, from a Carolina standpoint as a key matchup that could decide this game?
Well, you just talked about it with Tyler Van Dyke. But before we get there, I need to remind you folks that my man Donno is one of the co-hosts of Locked On College Football Kickoff Live. So make sure you tune into that tomorrow from 11 a.m. to noon Eastern. Don't let him get away with any North Carolina slander. Make sure he's bringing all that. No, I'm just kidding. Very seriously.
I just can't wait to see how much Drake and Kenton troll me for that Georgia Tech game.
I have been waiting all week. No, seriously, you guys do such a good job, Donno, with that. Thank you for how you get us all ready for the weekend of college football. Anyway, you talked about what a great game Van Dyke had last year for the Canes. And in fact, that was the key matchup that I'm watching this year is the North Carolina defense, and in particularly the D-line and the linebackers getting to Tyler Van Dyke, getting pressure on him, making him uncomfortable. You and I were talking about this before we started recording, Donno, but Carolina has 13 sacks on the year in 5 games so far. You spread that out from an average standpoint. Cool, that looks really good. But you dive into depth on these numbers, 9 of those sacks were in the first game against South Carolina, and then just 4 more spread out through the last 4 games. But what Carolina has been doing is getting to the quarterback. They just haven't always been getting him down. They've been making life a little bit more uncomfortable. The last year struggled mightily all over the field on defense, other than the linebacking core, which is returned and intact in the form of Cedric Gray, the heart and soul of this defense, and Power Echols. These dudes rack up tackles like it is their job. But North Carolina's defensive front is much improved this year. The heart and soul of that unit is Kamen Rucker, an undersized end who just gets there. I don't know how he does it with his size, but he does it. And then in the secondary, led kind of by a transfer from ETSU in Elijah Huzzy, who has 3 picks in the last 2 games, just making plays all over the field, including a punt return touchdown 2 games ago. But critically, Donno, for the Tar Heels, they've got to get to Tyler Van Dyke, make life uncomfortable, try to find their way picking through this line to get to him so that they don't allow a game like what you mentioned that he had last year, 496 passing yards. I'm taking a victory that we didn't allow him 4 more to get to 500 and those 3 passing touchdowns. And interestingly, Carolina did just face Garrett Schrader from Syracuse last week, who's a similar mold quarterback in terms of body size and things like that. But Tyler Van Dyke, that arm is just slightly better than Garrett Schrader. So Carolina's going to have to do a job. The O-line has to help out the secondary, not have to guard in space for forever. So that's the key matchup I'm watching for the Tar Heels. What about you on the Miami side?
Yeah.
Give me your response first.
I want a quick comment on that because you're 100% right, because I look at Carolina's defense is definitely being an improved group from last year. I mean, how can you not be? Because there's only one direction. Because I could say the same thing about Miami's offensive line. How can you not be better than you were last year? Because that was a horror show last season. I think actually probably the most improved position group on Miami is their offensive line. So giving Tyler Van Dyke time is going to be important. Miami has been a good running team all season long. I'm sure they're going to want to kind of set the tone on the ground. And something I'd like to see Miami do, both from a play design standpoint, and obviously the O-line is a big part of this, is maybe kick more runs to the outside, because they've been focusing most of their efforts between the tackles, and it's been fruitful. But when you've got speed at running back with players like A.J. Allen, who's super fast and explosive, and Chris Johnson, a true freshman track star who's starting to get a little bit more playing time, maybe not everything between the tackles might be a good thing to look for. But I think that's a great matchup. And obviously, Tyler Van Dyke, it's got to be better than he was against Georgia Tech for Miami to have any chance, right? But a key matchup that I look at, I could take a cop out and say, it all starts from putting pressure on Drake Maye, but it's so obvious. Like, Miami needs to pressure him. But I'm going to look at the actual matchup between the Miami Hurricanes secondary and North Carolina's very talented receivers. Because even if Miami can put Maye under duress, he can hurt him with his legs. He can buy time, improvise, and get the ball downfield, even if the pocket collapses. He's
or
so
get
good with
himself
that.
downfield.
Exactly. So he's going to get the ball to those talented receivers regardless. And that's been one area of Miami's defense, the defensive backfield. It's been a little bit hit or miss. I'm wondering if Tez Walker is going to be ready to be more of a protagonist this week. He's on paper. He could be North Carolina's best receiver, but he's working his way up. McCollum, Jones, Paysor have been really good so far this year. Now, on paper, I won't even say on paper because it's played out pretty well so far for Miami having, one of the best safety duos in the country in Cam Kinchins and James. Although Cam made a terrible mistake to allow that game-winning Georgia Tech. That was a mental lapse by him. But Cam and James have been awesome. And then there's going to be a huge task for Daryl Porter and Jaden Davis, who are Miami's starting cornerbacks, because neither of them are that tall. They're both under 6 foot. I think they've both outplayed the expectations so far this year. I've been very complimentary of both Porter and Davis so far, and they got the job done against Texas A&M, even though they're going up against very tall, talented receivers. This is going to be another test, right? Because I think North Carolina's offense could be even more dangerous than the one they faced against Texas A&M. So that matchup, Miami's defensive backs against all of Carolina's weapons. It all starts with the pass rush, sure, but at times you're going to have receivers downfield, one-on-one coverage. Miami's got to answer that call.
Yeah, I think that's a great observation there, Donno, because people, have heard about Tez Walker because of how public that's been. But also Nate McCollum, who you mentioned, a transfer from Georgia Tech, has been the ACC Receiver of the Week twice this year already.
Yeah.
And you've got J.J. Jones, who you mentioned, that had a 100-yard game a couple games ago. Kobe Paysor, who had I think the number one play on SportsCenter last week after a one-handed tip pass that he caught and ran to the end zone. I have heard, as we record this, I don't know if it's true, Donno, but I heard that something might have happened with one of his pinky toes in practice. Like, I just heard that a couple minutes ago. I have zero to go on with that of any kind of fact, but that's something to keep an eye on. But also, folks might not realize that Carolina has a 3-deep tight end group that all are receiving tight ends, including Bryson Nesbitt, who might, behind Drake Maye, might be one of the most prized NFL picks on this team. And so, yeah, Drake Maye does have this entire roster of people that'll catch it. But as I alluded to and terribly rudely interrupted you, I apologize.
You're fine.
Drake Maye, the other thing is, when he does get bottled up, just seems to have a way of slithering out and finding his way free. Had a left-handed touchdown pass earlier this year, Donno. I don't know if you saw that or remember that. But I mean, just stuff like that. And it is ridiculous. And how he's able to extend a play either with his legs or his arm is just, I wouldn't want to have to game plan against that. And I just want to remind Carolina folks to enjoy it while you got it, because my man's going to be gone in about 3 months. So keep your eyes on everything Drake Maye is trying to do this week. Folks, we've got more to get to. We want to make sure to talk about keys to victory for both teams. We're going to look at our game predictions based on our FanDuel lines, the #1 sportsbook in America, by the way, we'll remind you again. But before we get to all of that, I need to tell you that today's episode of Locked On Tar Heels and Locked On Canes is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you got to check out LinkedIn Jobs, which helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. It's really easy to create a free job post on LinkedIn Jobs, and then you just add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your profile to spread the word that you're hiring. After that, you can use simple tools like screening questions to make it easy to focus on the candidates with just the right experience and skill set so that you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and then ultimately hire. This is all why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus the leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free right now at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Again, that's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes and Locked On Tar Heels your first listen. Isaac and I on both ends will have you guys covered leading up to Saturday's matchup, Saturday night in prime time. And yes, as Isaac mentioned, on Friday morning, make sure you tune in to Locked On College Football Kickoff Live. Me, Drake Toll, Kenton Gibbs will be taking you through all the big storylines, Heisman race, top 25, the big games, coaches on the hot seat, all that good stuff. So make sure you tune in 11 a.m. to noon, streaming on these or any Locked On College YouTube channel. All right, Isaac, keys to victory for the Tar Heel side. And then people know we're going to get into those predictions as well, but let's start with the keys.
Interestingly, I have a general broad one and then two quick specifics, if I may, Donno. My
Sure.
general one, it sounds weird to say, but just keep doing what you've been doing. One of the Carolina struggles last year was that we talked about how bad that defense was. And it was like the offense had to win games. You had to score more to win. And Carolina's defense would routinely let them down. And then they're either clinging for dear life, hoping for a turnover, or maybe Drake Maye makes a last minute play. This year, Carolina, this is wild, has actually been able to pull away from opponents a little bit and finish games. Donno, it's the craziest thing because the defense has been making some plays. The offense keeps going, but the offense, what I want to get to with some specificity of keys to victory, #1 is to continue the balanced offensive approach. Carolina under Phil Longo last year, who's now the offensive coordinator at Wisconsin, that I'm still trying to figure out that move, was very much just straight up air raid. And it was like, we'll turn to our running game if and when we can. And Drake Maye ended up as the leading rusher last year. Sam Howell was the leading rusher the year before that. Carolina under new offensive coordinator Chip Lindsey has employed a much more balanced offensive approach this year. If the ground game is what's working, as it did against Appalachian State, where Omarion Hampton ran absolutely wild, Carolina's going to lean into that, even if it means that Drake Maye, oh my goodness, doesn't get to 300 yards and the fan base freaks out because he's not getting Heisman numbers. It's more important to get a win, and that's what Carolina is doing better this year, is balancing that offensive approach. As part of that, my second key is for Drake Maye to get 50 rushing yards. Sometimes that's going to be on a designed run. Sometimes that's just, as I was saying a minute ago, him just recognizing an opportunity to take off on third down or whenever it is. He loved a North Carolina writer recently said, I think Drake Maye might purposefully screw up on first and second down sometimes so that he can win on third down. And it's that kind of thing. But man, he's so successful at it. And so I think that threshold I'm looking for Drake Maye is in that 50-yard range. And I think that'll help be that balanced approach that Carolina needs to get that victory on Saturday night.
That was excellent. And I hope Mario Cristobal was listening so he can game plan for all of those great points that you've made. For me, my first key for Miami, it's something I've been harping on all week. Put Georgia Tech behind you. Oh, I shouldn't have to say it, but I do have to say it because that was such an emotionally draining loss.
Yep.
There are definitely concerns about how you respond to that. I actually think it's a good thing that this is a road game because road opportunities, you're traveling together, you can shut out, the outside world and the campus a little bit and just kind of focus on each other as teammates. I think sometimes it's better to go on the road after you suffer a tough loss like that. So that might help Hurricanes players avoid some of those distractions. That's #1. #2 would be protect Tyler Van Dyke. That's the big thing. Hopefully Miami can hold North Carolina to, 1 sack and not, the 9 that they were able to grab against South Carolina, because Miami's going to need to throw the football to win this game.
Right.
If nothing else, I think best case scenario is you win a shootout. A best case scenario for Miami, because I think a shootout is very possible because you're not going to shut Drake Maye down. So, and part of protecting Tyler Van Dyke, kind of a bonus key to that, is spread the football around a little bit more. Miami's been very reliant on Xavier Restrepo, who's been their top receiver this year. He seems to be always open somehow, but I think spreading the football around a little bit more, getting Colby Young, Jacoby George, maybe Tyler Harrell off the bench involved could help Miami diversify that attack a little bit. My third key, I know I kind of glossed over this last segment, but I'm going to hit it hard now. You've got to put Maye under pressure. Yeah. Even if he deals with that pressure well, create chaos, because chaos creates opportunity for a defense. I would argue for the past 3 weeks or so, Miami's best defensive lineman has actually been true freshman Ruben Bain.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if I can say that's great or maybe that's not so good, right? But Ruben Bain has been such a monster. He's been a difficult guy. A lot of times he gets held and they don't always call it, or he gets double teamed. Leonard Taylor really needs to step up. His reps are very productive, but he's not always on the field a whole lot. I think that may say something about his conditioning. He's got to be consistently putting pressure on Maye this week. Jafari Harvey on the outside as well. Branson Dean in the interior. And then I'll throw in a bonus key number 4. If you are fortunate enough to have a lead in your final offensive drive, take the knee. If you're fortunate enough. If you're fortunate enough in a tough game where you're 3.5-point underdogs, if you do have a 3-point lead or a 7-point lead or a 30-point lead, I don't care. Take that knee if you can run out that clock. I had to leave you with that one as well.
Oh, Donno, that's so good. I can create a little chart for Coach Cristobal that he can just consult and get it figured out. That's too good, man. I love it. Well, here's the thing. As we look at this series, I wouldn't guess this, but Carolina actually leads the all-time series against Miami 15-11. As you referenced earlier, it has been all Tar Heels lately. Carolina is on a 4-game winning streak. However, outside of that 2020 game, which we'll just leave that one to the side, I think. The other 3 in this winning streak have all been by 3 points. So lots of close games. Our partners at FanDuel have it North Carolina by 3.5 with an over-under set at 56.5. Donno, as you look at everything we've just talked about and where things are headed on Saturday night, how do you see this game turning out?
First thing I'm going to say is I've noticed that people are betting that over-under higher because I saw it, I think, earlier this week around 53.5, 54. I think the combined score is going to be in the 60s. So I'm still feeling good about the over. As far as the way the game plays out, wow. So I've been of the mind for the past few days that from a Miami standpoint, this can go one of 2 ways. Either it's the spiral or they bounce back and play their best game of the season. I think it's going to be one of those. So I'm going to stay on the optimistic side. Now, I'm not predicting a blowout. I would never do that because North Carolina's offense is too good. And Drake Maye could step into a few NFL lineups right now and play quarterback and wouldn't look out of place doing that. So I'm going to kind of keep on your theme of it being, about a 3-point game, which history says it probably could be. And I'm going to go Miami by 3, but I don't think there's going to be a take the knee situation. I think it'll be a game-winning field goal by Andres Borregales. So I'm going to go something like I'll go Miami 37, UNC 34.
Okay. A lot of what you just said was my exact thinking. I actually have it hitting the over, but not quite as much. A total of 59 for me. I have this game Carolina 31, Miami 28. Wow. Because how close? We're so close, Donno.
Yeah,
great minds. But your mind thought 3 points better for the Canes. Mine went 3 points better. Anyway, what you said about it would be better for the Canes if this was a bit of a shootout. As weird as it sounds for the Tar Heels, I think it's better if it's like in the middle of shootout and defensive struggle. That's why I'm going that 31-28 line. Carolina has hit 30 points in all 5 games this season. In fact, back-to-back seasons have started out the season 30 or more points in the first 5 games. And so I see them doing that again. There's the great, you talked about Kinchins and those guys in the secondary. You got to account for them. But again, Drake Maye versus that, I think there's going to be enough of Drake Maye to get there to that 30-point threshold. But I think Miami with Tyler Van Dyke, who has a history of success against Carolina, is going to get the Canes up several scores, several touchdowns. But I think that Carolina has just enough in the end to be able to pull it out 31-28. So Miami covers the spread for both of us. Another 3-game deficit or 3-point margin in this series, and we both have it hitting the over. Donno, these two teams I think are very evenly matched. Should be an electric game Saturday night.
Yeah, it should be. I can't wait to watch it. And it's prime time. It's going to be fun. Prime time on ABC. Hopefully, much of America is watching. Awesome job there by Isaac Shade from Locked On Tar Heels. Guys, if you want to support Locked On Canes, make sure to hit the like button, hit the thumbs up if you're watching us on YouTube, and subscribe to our channel. If you listen to the audio version, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Odyssey, Google, wherever you get your pods. And we'll talk to you again tomorrow on another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.